Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Keepin' Sporty podcast. As always, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or on our website at keepinitsporty.com. On today's episode, I am joined by a panel of guests to recap the Seahawks season this year, a season which found them at a 10-7 record, just missing out on the playoffs due to a tiebreaker being lost to the LA Rams. Today, I am joined by Zack Steinman, Cohen Showler, and Caden Slaunwhite. Gentlemen, how's it going?
Doing good.
I'm great. Yeah. Thank you
I'm
for
do
having us on.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yes, once again, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Okay, no problem, guys. It should be a fun talk today. Why don't we start with this? Why don't we recap the Seattle Seahawks season real quick? So, got off to a good start, of course, against some maybe easier opponents, you could say. The Broncos, Patriots, and Dolphins. They were 3-0 after that. They lost to the Lions and the Giants and the 49ers. Some question marks there, of course, with the Giants loss and maybe even the 49ers one looking back on it. They beat the Falcons, lost to the Bills. The Rams was a tough one as well against LA, another possible winnable game, I guess you could say. They won four in a row: San Francisco, Arizona a couple times, the Jets. They lost to Green Bay and Minnesota, and then they won against the Bears and the Rams. But of course, by then it was too late. So, first off, how had the Seahawks won one more game? I mean, we wouldn't even be talking about their season coming to an end right now, right? So, what do you guys think really went wrong with this season? Okay, Zach, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Cohen and then Caden.
So, um, I feel like one of the big reasons that this team struggled was kind of the offense a little bit. You go in with your first year offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who's used to the college football play style. And something that I saw a lot was we really weren't giving Kenneth Walker the ball. It was a lot of throws. And, you know, obviously with a quarterback like Geno Smith, he's not your top quarterback in the league like Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, but he'll get you
Top
the
10 for
job
sure,
done.
though.
He'll get you the job done, but then it comes to the offensive line who's struggling. We had injuries, they couldn't back up for Geno, and I feel like you could have had a brighter spot in your team if you gave the ball to Kenneth Walker more often because we know what he's capable of.
I agree with all those points. I think the offensive line was a absolutely huge issue the whole year. I mean, obviously, Ryan Grubb took the flack. I mean, he got fired for it, but it's hard to drop an offense when your quarterback has 2 seconds to throw the ball, and oh, as well as sorry, dog walked in. Uh, as well as the running game cannot be established without blocking. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I'd say our secondary was not as strong as it's been in years past. Obviously, Julian Love, Devin Witherspoon had amazing seasons. Even Kobe Bryant emerged as a starting level player. But Trey Brown really had a rough season. I know he missed some time, but when he was on the field, he was a bit of a liability, as well as Tariq Woolen, obviously, with some attitude and effort issues. But I mean, overall, just too many things added up for them to have a successful season.
Yeah, adding on to that, I feel like our defense as a whole was actually like fairly decent. Like I was obviously there was some individual performances. And like or like Cohen said, at certain times players lacked effort. But our defense as a whole, I believe I saw a stat, we were like last in the league last year, and McDonald was able to get us up to, I believe it was like top three in defense all around this year, which is great. But yeah, ultimately, I think it lies on our offense and most specifically our offensive line. Like Geno was sacked 50 times this year. That's the third most out of any quarterback in the NFL. And when you have a quarterback like Geno Smith, who's on the older side and sometimes kind of takes a little bit to see the play out and get the ball out, you need to have an offensive line that's going to give him enough time to really examine the field, see who's open, and then throw the ball. And additionally, yeah, the run game was not good this season at all, which is really crazy considering that we debatably have three like really good running backs. Like Walker, Charbonnet, and McIntosh, they're all very good backs and can be used very, very well in this league. And the fact that they just weren't they weren't really utilized at all under this offense Like the amount of times it's like 3rd and 3 and we're throwing the football when you have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet specifically, who can just run like a bat out of hell. Like I feel like just the play calling this year was very questionable. And yeah, but it all goes down to the offensive line. I feel like that's something we really need to address this offseason.
Well, we saw multiple times this year Charbonnet trucking through guys. And
Exactly.
I'm totally agreeing with you on 3rd and 3. We shouldn't be throwing screen passes. We
Yeah.
should be running the ball, trying to find a hole and get your first down and
hmm
mark through. And also, I didn't really get a chance to talk about the defense, but one guy in particular who had a monster year, Leonard Williams.
Yeah.
That guy saved us multiple times on the defense, and I feel that he's definitely a piece that I'd want around for a little bit to keep this defense kind of on the upwards trend. And again, I think it was Cohen saying Reek Woolen with a little bit of his attitude. And I feel like we have that again on both sides of the ball because you have Reek on the defense and BK on the offense. And I feel like if they just calm down a little, less flags will be thrown. And we know, I think it was what was it against the Dolphins? We had like a billion flags. We were all watching that together. So many flags were thrown that it was like at this point, it was crazy that we even pulled out the W with the amount of penalty yards that we lost.
Well, we were facing Tim Boyle, so I think that helped.
That is true.
Sorry, another point I have about the defense. We replaced our entire linebacking core halfway through the season. And I
That's
think
true.
I really like what Mike McDonald's philosophy, what he brought to Seattle is like, if you're not playing well, like you're out of here. So obviously Jerome Baker getting traded and then Dodson just getting cut. And then our new linebackers played amazing. Ernest Jones, really hope
Ernest
he gets
Jones was
extended.
awesome.
Please
I
bring
want
him
him
back.
back.
Please bring him back.
He
Mhm.
needs to be back.
Yeah, I honestly agree with all your points that you raised. I think that the offensive linebackers were definitely a liability for this team this year. Geno Smith was not having or did not have enough time to throw oftentimes, did get sacked a lot, like you mentioned, Caden. And I think that all in all, the defense played really well. I mean, if you look at some of their wins, the defense really came up huge in a lot, and then they had a big factor in my opinion. So now, speaking about Mike McDonald a little bit more. First year as a Seahawks head coach, do you guys approve of the job he's done since he's taken over for Pete Carroll?
100%. 100%.
I
He
would agree.
I would agree as
he
well.
came in his first year, racked up 10 wins with the team that had already been put together. I feel like it's only going up for him from here. Like he's done a great job. I mean, I haven't seen a defense from the Seahawks this good. It's felt like a hot minute. So what he came to do after being the Ravens defensive coach, coming in and showing kind of a new style of Seahawks defense, I loved his first year. And you can't really complain at him for some of the losses because that's on the players themselves for just not performing enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think he did great. I mean, I'd say there was no times during the season. I feel like his in-game management was there was nothing, no concerns about it. I was never like, oh, why did he call a timeout there? Or why did he? I remember Pete Carroll had some questionable challenges
Yeah.
quite often, and I felt that McDonald did not have those situations.
Well,
Also,
at some time,
obviously,
it felt like Pete would just throw the challenge flag on the field for the sake of it.
yeah, yeah, it's like you'd find it in his pocket and then
What's
remember what it's
this?
for. Exactly. Uh, but also, it is obviously his first year in Seattle, so he was just kind of taking over the Pete Carroll team. I believe. I mean, we even saw it just as I mentioned with the linebackers. A couple of years down the road, once he's implemented his style into the defense, they've acquired players that match his fit, his scheme. They'll just be even better, flying all over the place, confusing quarterbacks. It'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, I completely agree. This first year was, I would say, a complete success for Mike McDonald. Just considering all of the factors and the offense kind of underperforming, he took the defense and made it into something special again, like something that teams should are actually worried about when they come and play Seattle. On top of that, I've loved the culture that he's kind of established with this group. I feel like you give him a few more years and you kind of like Cohen said, you get players that really fit kind of his mold and what he wants to do and what he wants this team to become. I feel like these guys can be like really, really scary down the line.
Yeah, I have to say, Mike McDonald coming in, I was a little bit questionable on the decision because I liked Pete Carroll as a head coach. I thought he was a good head coach. But you know what? He put all my doubts to rest because honestly, just well-timed plays. Well, again, no kind of questionable timeouts, I guess you can call them. So I have to agree with all of you there. I agree that Mike McDonald really played well. And it's honestly so tough that we're even talking about the Seattle team not being in the playoffs right now because it's like, okay, maybe you lose one tough one against the Giants, a tough one against the Rams. They lost to the Vikings. I mean, looking back on that game, even against the Vikings, you can say, well, going in, they definitely shouldn't be beating the Vikings. It was a close game. I mean, they possibly, arguably should have had that game. So, I
But
mean, just,
they held their ground for a good portion of that game. And actually, that was Caden's first Seahawks game. He was
I was
there.
there. I was there.
wow. What was the
That was
atmosphere like,
another one.
Caden?
Oh,
You have to
it
give us your
was
insight.
yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, my first ever NFL game. Yeah, it was awesome. Nothing like I've ever seen before, like going to like hockey games and basketball games and baseball games. Yeah, Lumen Field is something special. It was always loud. I was never sitting down. Like every single play, everyone just stood up and I was like, yeah, like it was awesome. I had a lot of fun. Obviously, you would have liked a different result, but the whole experience was awesome. Highly, highly recommended.
Well, I feel like going off of what you said is so loud. It's kind of something that the Seahawks need to work on because
Hmm.
look how many fans were
Yeah.
there from opposing teams this
Yep.
year. It's
There
never
was a
been
lot of
like
Viking
that
fans in
going
the
to
game. I bet.
Seattle. Like, think about like the Legion of Boom teams. You know how scared teams were to come into Seattle because of the fans and the loudness? We heard a Go Pack Go chant break out on Sunday Night Football.
In the first quarter,
Yeah, in the first
Yeah.
quarter.
they weren't even blowing us out yet.
On live television, nationally broadcasted for millions of people to watch, hearing Go Pack Go at Lumen Field. Like that was like very questionable because as I said, in recent teams, it's just all Seahawk chanting and all Go Hawks. And now it's like, wait, this isn't what it's supposed to be.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
So
I think the way to fix that issue is it's all of that is season ticket holders
Yeah,
selling
I was
tickets.
gonna say that.
So
yeah,
it's we gotta there's got to be some sort of reselling rule or
Hmm.
something. You have to attend a certain amount of games. Like it's just unacceptable to have our home field advantage is gone. It used to be so feared, and now we're a road team. We're the best road team in the NFL.
yeah,
We
we had
should
a
be going home.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
great
7-1,
road
I think.
record this year. Oh, 7-1.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that was, if I'm correct, that's the best road record in Hawks history.
Hmm.
Definitely.
So that's also something that they need to kind of look at.
Yeah, when you're hearing "Go Pack Go," I mean, come on, like what? We're doing something wrong here, right? Like that's you're right though. Back to your guys' point. I mean, Seattle used to be a place where a lot of people feared to go into, and now it's like, just Seattle. I don't know. It's not good.
I
It's
mean,
not good.
I've seen hockey teams do this thing where you have to be like a legal resident of the state to get a ticket into the game.
Mhm.
Then you have resellers who come in to say, and they're like, oh, well, I'm a legal resident of the state of Washington, but you can have my ticket if you buy it off of me. And then it's just the same thing in a snowball effect. So
Hmm.
something they need to look into.
I agree with you, Zach. I agree. Now, the Seahawks, again, had they made the playoffs, would have been a different story today. 15 teams won 10 plus games this season, and Seattle was the only one to miss the playoffs because of course, that tiebreaker. If Seattle made the playoffs, do you think they could have kept up with all these teams? I mean, you see like the Chiefs and the Lions and the Ravens and all these powerhouse teams, and then you have the Seahawks. What do you guys think?
I
We'd be playing the
feel
Vikings, right?
it, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel ultimately that we wouldn't have gone to the Super Bowl if like we're being realistic here. But I feel like we could have won maybe one game because you look at it, we'd have home field advantage if we won that division. And again, we talked about the fans coming in, but Lumen Field in the playoffs is something different. The fans will come to that. Like they'll come out support the Hawks. And I feel like it would be a revenge game against the Vikings, if anything, because of how close the previous matchup was. They'd want their revenge back against Minnesota. But then if you get on with a win, you'd have to face teams like the Lions eventually. And I feel like the Lions are just too much of a powerhouse right now to be stopped.
I agree. I would like our chances against Minnesota. I mean, we saw week 18 against the Lions. They just blitzed Darnold and he could not handle it. I mean, he definitely showed shades of his older self, his Jets and Panthers self. But I really think we've had a good chance against the Vikings. But yeah, like you said, down the line, there are definitely some really talented teams in the NFC. Like I know we always beat the Eagles, but they're very, very good.
We haven't lost to the Eagles since before all of us were born,
Hmm.
which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
I would agree. I would say that I did like, or I would have liked our chances against the Lions. I mean, like I said, I was at the game. And honestly, on the game winning drive for Minnesota, the thing that like really killed us was the penalties.
Trey
Now,
Brown.
some of them maybe shouldn't have been called. Some of them maybe weren't penalties, and there was also a few holds that weren't called against Minnesota. But I'm not gonna get into that right now. But like we were right there. We were right there with the Vikings. We were one score away from beating them. And I feel like if you ran that game back, like Zach said, in Lumen Field playoff atmosphere, I feel like we would get a different result and the Seahawks would beat the Vikings. After that, it's a very tough discussion. They would need a lot to go right for them. Their whole team would need to kind of click at the exact same time, and I don't
Well,
really know if that would
who would we
happen.
play if we beat Minnesota?
Well, it's I don't would it be Detroit? No.
Well, it depends on the seeding because
Yeah, 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 yeah. It would depend on who wins, but
we
I
would
feel
have been the
like
3 seed, I guess, or
yeah, we would have
four,
been.
Yeah,
3 or 4.
Wait,
depending on
Yeah,
yeah.
depending on
aren't
who
we?
depending on who won, like depending on who
Yeah,
won the other games. But yeah, I
I
feel
think
like I feel like we would
we
have
would
beat
be
the
ranked
Vikings.
higher than the Buccaneers, though.
we did have a better record than them, so we would have been the three.
We would have been three,
They would have
so
been
we
the
would have
four.
versed. Yeah, so we wouldn't have versed Detroit. But yeah, I would have liked our chances against the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, I like our chances against the Vikings as well if we were to have gotten the opportunity to play them, of course. But kind of tough. I mean, yeah, and then you look back on that and you say, okay, the Seahawks didn't beat the Vikings. They beat the Bears. I'm sure you guys were watching that Rams Cardinals game or at least keeping an eye on it. And of
Oh,
course, well,
run the
run
ball,
the
Kyler,
ball,
run the ball,
run the
Kyler,
damn
And
ball.
run
I
the ball.
texted Caden and I said, of course, our season ends on an interception at the 1 yard line again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just
Uh,
PTSD for Hawks fans in a game that they're not even playing in. And I feel that this happens way too often to sports teams where they don't do enough to the point where they have to rely on other teams to win. That's where you really get screwed over because it's out of your hands at that point. And that's what the Hawks did this year. So next year they got to win some more important games. And I mean, the game against the Giants, very questionable. They kind of, I don't know if you guys were watching, but I mean, Caden and Cohen, if you guys were with me, but they kind of jumped over our O line and blocked the kick, where I think that's an illegal rule. You can't jump until it's already snapped or some
Like
sort of
Cam
rule.
Chancellor.
Yeah. So that's a questionable one. I mean, again, talk about where the Vikings, we were so close. The Niners, I feel like we could have beat at Lumen, but that alone was a bad game. I think that was the game Laviska Shenault had a return, right?
this is Chanel, what a
Yes, but
guy.
also fumbled.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
that's
canceled it out.
also, I mean, I was gonna say another thing we talk about is the special teams because the special teams this year was quite horrendous, if I do say so.
Here's the thing. I mean, you can look back on all those games that you say we could have won, but it also goes the other way where you're saying, well, if the Dolphins have Tua, right? Maybe we
Yeah.
don't beat them. The Jets game, I mean, we kind of got lucky there because the
Yeah,
Jets
Oh
weren't
yeah.
playing that
They
well,
had us
nor
in
were
the
we.
first half.
they did.
Not gonna lie.
So
Not gonna-
Not gonna lie, they had us in the first half.
it kind of balanced itself out more or less, but again, tough way
I
to
mean, that
go.
was also a crazy game. Leonard Williams had a
Yeah,
pick
the pick
six.
six.
Yeah.
Pick
Like
six.
thick six.
Oh gosh. Okay, well, listen, why don't we move on to Geno Smith a little bit? Kind of a two-part question here for you guys. Do you want him back in a Seahawks uniform? Do you think he's going to be the Seahawks main QB? So do you want him back, and do you think he's going to be back? Could be two different answers. Could be the same.
Do I want him back? And I think he will be back. I mean, we've heard McDonald say that there's no reason where he wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I guess you could say, yeah, I want him back just because there's still missing parts of this team before we can go make a deep playoff run. And if you're going to waste money on a quarterback who is playoff like talented and for a team who's just going to miss out by a few games again, I don't see it being worth it. You build your team, and then once you think you're getting in that close range with your offensive line being better and the secondary kind of keeping their ground, I feel like then is when you go out and try and find that quarterback. I mean, you can always draft, but as a lot of my favorite teams do, too good to get a low pick and too bad to kind of be at the top.
I mean, I honestly, my answer for both questions is yes. I want him back, and I think he'll be back. The reason I want him back is I just believe that there's no really other quarterbacks that would replace him and do a better job right now. I mean, the options are obviously Darnold, someone in the draft, but we're not going to have a high enough pick to get any of the top
And
end
and
quarterbacks.
honestly, I feel like this year Darnold had a one out.
Definitely. I don't know. I am a bigger believer in Geno than Darnold for sure.
Okay. They wrote Geno off. Didn't write
Hmm
back though.
Yeah, right back
hmm
then.
Yeah, like I was saying, the quarterbacks in the draft, I would not be opposed to maybe a day two or day three pick, maybe someone like Jackson Dart in the fourth round or someone like that sit behind Geno for a couple years to
Exactly. And
develop.
let Geno
Maybe,
mentor him a little bit.
mhm. Maybe we get another Russ situation where we get a nice quarterback in late rounds.
Yeah, I
But then
mean that's the beauty of the draft though. You never know what you're gonna get.
mhm, definitely. And then yeah, the free agent quarterbacks, there's just not the upside there. Not at all. And then acquiring a quarterback another way through trade or like free agency, trade would take an incredible amount of assets. And even so, I don't believe there's many top end quarterbacks that would be available right now. So I know everyone always wants change in sports. It's always cut Geno, whatever, all this, but it's not that simple to do. And I mean, we saw Sam Howell come in for a couple drives. It was brutal. So,
That
so
Oh
that
bad.
was
man, that was
horrendous.
terrible.
It's like you don't realize how good you have it until you have to watch Sam Howell play quarterback.
Yeah. I'd say I agree with both. I do think Gino will be back next year, and I want him back, but I also want this team to start planning for after Gino because the thing that I'm the most kind of afraid of with this team is because I'd say we're a younger team, right? When all of these guys enter their primes, Gino's going to be out of his, and we're just going to be in this weird situation. So, I would not be opposed to either, yeah, like Cohen said, drafting a quarterback kind of in the later rounds, or just find somebody young and someone kind of with potential and with talent that can sit behind Gino for a year or two, and then when they're ready to kind of take over, then you just kind of make the switch. Um, I do. Last year, I wanted the Seahawks to get Justin Fields.
I
I'm
was going to
still,
mention him. I
yeah,
think that's a great
I'm
option.
still on that. I'm still on that train. However, I don't know if he wants to be a backup again, considering what kind of happened in Pittsburgh. But
Yeah.
if we wanted to sign Justin Fields, I'd be all for that. Another kind of young quarterback that I'd be thinking of is JJ McCarthy.
I heard a
If
lot about that,
I
him
yeah,
possibly coming to Seattle.
if Minnesota decides to go with Darnold for and lock him up, I mean, like Darnold's only 28, so McCarthy would be a backup for a little bit. I don't know if he's gonna like that, and I feel like we could definitely get him for like a mid-round pick, like a second and like a fourth or something like that. Like it wouldn't be like a crazy haul that we'd have to give up for him. And if you sit him behind Geno for a little bit, I think that could be something really special. So yeah, I do think Geno will be back. I do want him back because at times he's been a very good quarterback for this team. But I also think that we should start planning for the future as well, kind of after Geno Smith. What are we gonna do? Who's gonna lead this team? Stuff like that.
So, guys, has Tyler Lockett played his last game with Seattle? What do you guys think?
Unfortunately, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I saw he was doing a press conference after the game, and he said, "My first game with Seattle was against the Rams, and this could have been my last game, which was also against the Rams." So kind of like a full circle moment for him. But I feel that now that he's gone, quote unquote, I feel like we'll obviously have JSN will be wide receiver one, DK will be wide receiver two, and I feel like Jake Bobo is going to end
Big
up
Bobo.
getting a bigger role, more Bobo, they say. I feel like he's going to have a bigger role with the team now, being potentially wide receiver three.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see them bringing in someone else in, not just relying on Bobo. But
Also true.
I do agree with Zach, though. I do think that was Lockett's last game. I mean, obviously, you saw him like it was what, like 4 hours before the game. He was the only player out there just soaking it all in.
Yeah.
I mean, there was even questions if he would play this year. But I don't know, I've read some articles. I don't know, I'm a big Lockett fan, so I've been following it pretty closely. But
I
he
mean,
was grateful that
he's a
McDonald brought him
favorite in
back.
Seattle.
Oh
Yes.
yeah. And he'll be a Seahawk for life. He always says that, like he'll
100%.
he'll keep coming back. But he does want to play another season, and I just like he's not going to be playing it with the Seahawks. I mean, he had uh almost, I wouldn't say non-existent, but the smallest role like by far we've ever seen him in. Probably only about 2 or 3 targets a game, just
Yeah,
not
and
not getting shut,
I
not
feel
getting
like
set up for those.
JSN has a big factor in that just because of how good he's been.
Yeah.
And I'm huge on JSN. I mean, obviously, Lockett, as you said, Hawk for life. And I mean, give it 2, 3 years down the road, he's going to be back raising the 12s flag for like a Thursday night against the Niners. And it's going to be electric.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously competing. They're both slot wide receivers, so bit smaller, but I mean, JSN has just really taken that role and gone with it. I mean, you're just not going to put in a 30 mid 30s Lockett in place of JSN, who's a
No,
young
you
star in this
can't.
league. So, I mean, the writing's been on the wall. I mean, it's obviously sad to see, but yeah, I think that was definitely his last game in Seattle.
Yeah. I mean I hope they bring him back. But ultimately I unfortunately don't think they're going to. Yeah, like you guys said, the writing was on the wall. He had those cleats last game where it was showed like his
Yeah,
draft number and
with
his
his
and his
draft
pick.
pick.
And yeah, he was yeah, like you guys said, he was out on the field before the game. He was made captain the last game. Something that I actually completely like I didn't realize, but um in the last home game, like the game against Minnesota, he was the final person announced on offense. Like he was announced after
Oh
Geno, after
yes.
DK, after JSN. I didn't realize that until like halfway through the game. I was like, oh, like Tyler Lockett was the last guy
So
announced. Like I
you
think
could say you saw Tyler Lockett's last game in
I
Seattle.
yeah, I think I probably did, unless he goes to like, a team that plays in Seattle next year. But yeah, I think the writing's been on the wall for a while now. It is unfortunate. I wish we could bring him back. Um, I honestly thought that they were going to kind of target him a little bit more in the last game. It was a nothing game if it is Tyler Lockett's last
Yeah.
game. Unfortunately, Geno decided to have a Noah Fant legacy game for some reason, but that's That's neither here
Hey,
nor
we
there.
don't complain about
Yeah,
Noah
we
Fant.
don't complain about Noah Fant getting receiving yards, but I kind of wish Lockett got the ball a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunate. I love you, Tyler. You're the best, but unfortunately, I do not think he will be back next year.
No, and
When
we
Lockett
all
watches
wish
this,
him.
just know we
Yeah,
all
when
love
Tyler
him.
Lockett watches this, just know we
Tyler, if
love
you
you,
see
buddy.
this, we wish you the best of
love you, buddy.
success. The Hawks love you. So,
Yes, Tyler Lockett, when you totally realistically watch this, just know we're here for you. And if you want a career in podcasting, maybe you should come
Yeah.
on to the Keepin Sporty
good
podcast.
idea. Hey, he's a football player. He's already a real estate agent. Who says he won't do another podcast?
Mhm.
Why not, huh?
I mean, we've got some competing to do with Richard Sherman's podcast, but
Ugh.
But yeah, listen, I mean, that was a lot of fun, guys. Thanks for coming on.
thank
Thanks
you
Thank
for
you for
having
having
us.
us.
No problem. That was
Hey.
like perfectly in sync, everyone. So
It
that was
was.
great.
As Russell Wilson said, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Yes, sir. Go Hawks. Okay, take care, guys. Have a good
Yeah.
afternoon.
Yeah, you too.